we have this interpretation of rejection, or whatever the interpretation is. It's bad. It feels bad. I don't want it, which holds us back from doing more of it, right? Most of the time, which actually, another word for that is like resistance, right? And sales resistance is actually a really important one to think about, because if you are resisting doing the things that bring in sales, then you're actually resisting your mission as a coach. Because if you can't bring in the sales, it's going to be hard for you to make that difference for somebody longer term, right? You need to be able to sell. So selling is actually more about making a difference. And if you still think of selling as a bad word, you're going to have sales resistance, of course. And even people who think of it as a good word have sales resistance, right? So like having that sales resistance means you actually have coaching resistance. And so if you have coaching resistance, you're not doing the work of being a coach as much. So I think it's really important to think like it seems like, oh, rejection is just one thing, but there's a whole cascade of things that happen as a result, which makes you unable to fulfill the very thing you got into coaching to do, which is make a difference for people. So like get those supportive people around you and like find out where your sales resistance is.
Yeah, and I've worked with a handful of, I think they all came from a chain of 5 or 6 referrals from the same company. And they were salespeople, and I forget the name. It's an company in US, and they're door-to-door sales. And these are younger people, anywhere from 19 all the way to 25, and they have a really good structure for promoting from within, and they train them and they become managers, supervisors. But their training system was really interesting, and here's how it worked. They would Every team had one manager who would also be a salesperson, and he had about 5 or 6 guys with him. And I think it was all guys. When he was sharing at the time, all of them were sharing. So, and I've worked with the manager and I've worked with the sales people too. So what the manager does is the night before they have a call with each other. It's like, okay, here's the plan. Here's how everything happened. And then the morning off, one of his first thing in the morning is get ready, and then he goes to the office and he has a meeting with the other managers, and then they get started with the first 1 hour session to talk about their game plan, what are the challenges, issues, and then he would go with them and model. If there are new people, he would go model that
You mean the
process for
sales
them.
team after, so you take me to the managers, then the sales team. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
the sales team, he would model the process for them. If they had already gone through that process, they would get dropped off in their areas, and they would go door to door. Then end of the day, they would all debrief and go through that process. So they would constantly deal with the mindset challenges. They would constantly deal with, give them support, and it's like daily. And that's what helped them move forward. And even then, they had a hard time refining the process. So generally, like, and this is a fairly successful company all over US. But the thing that I want to point out is how much social support and influence they have within that area for them to grow as salespeople. And that's the challenge that you hear from coaches that come into our community, and the coaches that I've talked to, is they feel lonely. And I just posted in our Facebook group, if you're a part of, you can see Eric's testimonial. One of the first things that he shared is that I've been trying this for a year and I've made 1 or 2 sales, but I feel completely alone. And for human beings, if you study enough of human beings, you understand that isolation is not the best place for a human mind to be in, unless you're really trained to be in that space. But most people don't operate very well when they're isolated. And most coaches actually just feel isolated. And for me, initially, when I was starting out, just like you, I didn't have a lot of support. I had to get my wife on board in the process. We worked together to move forward, but she didn't even understand what I was doing, to be honest. And she was accepting and supportive, but she didn't understand what I was doing. And most other people, just like you, it didn't make any sense for me to jump ship from an engineering path to this, especially right after finishing school and working a couple of years. Okay, this is not for me. Like, that looked like the most ridiculous thing, and I couldn't explain how this path would support me. So I felt this huge resistance, along with the fears to put myself out there. I felt being held back, and the thing that helped me was being around other people that that help me a lot, who are actually trying these things, who are actually doing these things. This is why masterminds are so important. This is why community is so important. So if you're kind of trying to do this from the background alone in front of your computer, you might feel like you know all the technical stuff of it, or you know a lot of it, but you're not moving forward. Likely it's an emotional thing. Likely you don't have the positive social reinforcement for you to move forward, and it makes it 100 times harder than it needs to be.
Yeah, and actually that brings up a whole other series of things. I totally relate to everything you said, Faisal. Like I couldn't explain it, other people can explain it, and then I wasn't succeeding, so I felt even more embarrassed because I wasn't making the progress like I used to do in my engineering career and my management career. I was like, I got to be really good at that game because I practiced it for years, and I had support. But when you leave corporate or you leave a job to do something like coaching, like all of a sudden, like you're responsible for your own sales, you're responsible for your own professional development, you're responsible for your own networking community, for your own plug into the industry, and all of a sudden, it's like a huge amount of uphill battle
Yeah.
for most people emotionally.
And not to mention, so I've worked with coaches who have actually come from the sales background. They have a hard time in this process, and there's one reason is that even when you've been in a sales background, you're selling another person's product, so you're not necessarily taking full responsibility for the product. The delivery is done by a whole system that's been working on it for a while. You're just making the offer, supporting them, and you have enough confidence in the people who are delivering it that, okay, this will be good.
Mm-hmm.
But now imagine you're on the line for the whole thing. And this is why it feels so heavy, that you're gonna come in and it's like, hey, you're gonna offer a $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 program, and I'm gonna deliver this. And so on the one hand, you have control over the whole thing. On the other hand, you have the full responsibility. And then this it reminds me of another Seinfeld episode where one of the characters comes in. And one of her friends wants somebody to babysit her child, and her name is Elaine. And instead of asking her to babysit her child, she's like, "Do you know anybody responsible to take care of?" And she feels offended, so she goes to Jerry, and they're sitting in front of each other. She's like, I'm responsible. Why does she think that I'm not responsible? Jerry looks at her, he's like, why do you want to be responsible? Anything, whenever something goes wrong, people look for the person who's responsible.